Greetings, everybody. I always have to start out with something weird, don't I? Well, I'm finally here with my long-awaited horror comic video, part 1. Actually, I call this the Atomic Age horror comics because if the Golden Age ended in 1945, as Overstreet says, which I believe is true, and the Silver Age didn't start until 1956 with the first Silver Age appearance of the Flash, the new Flash in DC Comics in showcase number 4, then what do we call that period between 1946 and 1956? I think appropriately it should be called the Atomic Age, because that's exactly what it was. The atomic bombs, being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, all the exploration into atomic energy and everything else. So that's kind of what I refer to it as, and that's what I even wrote Overstreet several times, and they always take that into consideration, along with his advisors, so-called advisors. But yeah, anyway, to get started, I have everything in alphabetical order. It will also include some stuff from the Silver Age. That's all part of the Atomic Age, the Golden Age, and some Silver Age stuff. So that's like a transitory period, But anyway, it'll have some Atlas. I'll have some Atlas stuff that I'll be showing you. But to start off, the first issue that I have is Adventures into Darkness, number 7 from 1952, and the cover and artwork here is by interior artwork, and the cover is by a guy called Katz, who started his career back in the Golden Age, working for Archie and Fawcett Comics, and he also did some work for Stan Lee, I think. But his biggest achievement, what he's most well known for, is something that he spent 12 years working on. That was a project that he wrote called oh man, what was it now? Kingdom, the First Kingdom. And I've never read it, but it's about man's migration into space. So that's what he's famous for, and I have to pick that up because I like to read it. Anyway, this is artwork and cover by Katz, 1952. The next issue I have is Adventures into the Unknown. This is number 1 from 1948 and is commonly regarded as the first true horror comic. Overstreet says that it competes with Eerie number 1 as the first horror comic, but in actuality this comic book is the first continuing horror comic series. And Eerie number 1, which he says this competes with for the first for honor of the first comic book, was published in 1947. So in my eyes, Eerie number 1 from 1947 is the first horror comic, even though it was published as a one-shot. And Overstreet kind of refers to these as supernatural comics / horror comics, which is what they are, supernatural / horror comics. And if Overstreet seems to be confused at times, because he also says that this is the first horror comic. This is published in 1943, Jekyll and Hyde. This is Classic Comics number 13, and this is actually a reprint, one of many of the reprint editions that Classic Comics did. But in the Overstreet price guide, after the title, he has a little note there that says first horror comic with a question mark, because I don't consider this, as well as many other people don't consider this, a true horror comic, because it just takes a classic work that was published, in 1986. I mean in 1886, and reprints it in comic book format. This is the classic story that was published before in book form. And then he does the same thing for Classics Illustrated number 26, which is Frankenstein, and he has a note next to the title that states second horror comic with a question mark. And again, this is a classic, as they're called Classic Illustrated for a reason, because they're reprinting classic stories that were published. In this case, this was published more than 100 years earlier in 1816 by Mary Shelley. So they're not really the first horror comics, even though he has a question mark because he doesn't know. Overstreet doesn't know everything. Anyway, now the next comic that I have is an Atlas comic, Adventures into Weird Worlds, number 25 from 1954. And again, I want to talk about this right here. I know I've talked about this before. Where is it? Right here. This is the first comics code. I don't know if you can see that there. Get up there. You probably can't see it that well, but in that star right there, it'll say conforms to the comics code, and it's by the Association of Comic Magazine Publishers. Now that organization was formed in 1948. That group of publishers that got together included Lev Gleason, who published most of the crime comics, and of course EC Comics, that published a lot of the horror stuff. And as you can see, Atlas Comics was also a part of that. I think they might have joined a little bit later, but they got together you know, after feeling the anti-comics heat, you know, with attacks on comic books like oh, what is it, that one in that's published by Time Magazine in December 20th, in the December 20th issue, 1948, Time Magazine. They published a real quick article under what was it? Oh, let me just take a look at my notes here real quick. Under Manners and Morals, where it states that in Binghamton, New York, students of St. Patrick's Parochial School collected 2,000 objectionable comic books in a house-to-house canvas, and they burned them in the schoolyard. That's from Time Magazine, December 20th, 1980. And it was, here, I'll even show you a picture of that. They also published a picture in Time Magazine, but I haven't been able to get it from the internet, but it also happens to be in this book by David Raju, who supposedly a scholar. And here is the photograph of all these kids that collected the comic books, and they are burning them. 1948, December 20th. This is probably sometime after Thanksgiving, since it's cover date of Time Magazine, December 20th. And if you can see in the bottom there, it says 1949, which is a mistake, because his photograph was in Time Magazine accompanying the article in December 20th, 1948. So it just goes to show you that even the scholarly David Raju is susceptible to the same human frailties that we all suffer from, myself being the exception, of course. What? And yeah, there it is. You can only imagine what comics were going into that fire bin, you know, 1948. possibly even some Action #1s, Detective Comics #27, and God knows what other key issues, all just going into the fire for really no reason at all. But if you didn't think that they burned comic books back then, here's the proof right there. So, now that I got that out of the way, the next issue that I have is Adventures into Weird Worlds #19, again by Atlas Comics. Here's their first code again. That's the first comics code. It's from June 1953. You know, the two biggest publishers at the time, Dell Comics and DC Comics, they never joined that Association of Comic Magazine Publishers because they already, you know, way back in 1941 created their own internal review boards, you know, because there was an outcry already at that time, and they created their own internal review boards to look over their comic content and approve them. And they usually published what do you call it, the names of the you know, respected citizens and teachers and child welfare experts on the first page or the inside cover, and including psychiatrists they had hired to look over their material and approve them for reading. So that, you know, that helped to offset the outcry against comic books for a little while anyway. But let's see, show you the next one I have is Adventure into Weird Worlds #18. This is from 1955. And by that time you don't see that comic code approval stamp on there anymore, because it was already the Senate hearings that forced the new code, or forced the comics industry to adopt a new code. So that was coming. But this is a very cool cover. I don't have any of the information on the interiors, writers or artists, but it's Atlas. Of course, Atlas is Marvel Comics. And you know, that's about all the time I actually got right now. So I hope you come back for part 2, and I'm just going to sign off here and see if I can get going into part 2 right away. Captain Strange Life signing off. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and see you next time.